If you're over 70, you've probably noticed moments when your memory doesn't work quite the way it used to. Maybe you walked into a room and forgot why you went there. Maybe you struggled to remember a name you've known for years. Maybe you found yourself searching for a word that sits just out of reach. And if you're like most people, these moments worry you. They make you wonder if something's slipping, if this is the beginning of something you can't stop. But here's what I want you to understand. Most of what people call memory problems at your age aren't problems at all. They're normal changes that happen to everyone. And more importantly, they don't mean your mind is declining. What matters isn't whether these moments happen. What matters is what you do in response to them. Because the patterns I've seen in people who stay sharp well into their 70s, 80s, even 90s, those patterns have less to do with luck and more to do with daily choices that anyone can make. Good morning. My name is Harold Bennett. I've spent decades watching how people age, paying attention to what separates those who stay mentally sharp from those who don't. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to pretend I have medical credentials I don't possess. But I've learned to recognize patterns. I've seen what works and what doesn't, and I've helped enough people understand how to protect their mental clarity that I believe I can help you too. Today I want to talk about something that matters deeply to your independence, to your quality of life, to your ability to stay yourself. I want to talk about keeping your mind sharp, not through complicated programs or expensive interventions, but through simple, daily practices that make a real difference. These aren't things that might work. These are patterns I've watched succeed again and again in real people's lives. I want you to listen carefully to what I'm going to share. And if you find this conversation helpful, if it changes how you think about protecting your mental sharpness, I hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel. I make these videos because this information matters, and I'd like to keep having these conversations with you. Let me start with something that surprises most people. The single most important thing you can do for your mental sharpness has nothing to do with puzzles or brain games or memory exercises. It has to do with conversation. Real, genuine, back-and-forth conversation with other people. Not small talk about the weather, though that has its place. I mean conversations where you're truly engaged, where you're listening carefully to what someone else is saying, where you're forming thoughts in response, where ideas are moving between you. Here's why this matters so much. When you're having a real conversation, your brain is doing remarkable work. You're processing language as it comes in. You're holding context in your working memory. You're accessing your long-term memory to pull up relevant experiences or information. You're formulating responses, choosing words, monitoring whether you're being understood. You're reading facial expressions and tone. You're adjusting your message based on feedback. All of this is happening simultaneously, and it's exactly the kind of complex, integrated brain activity that keeps your mind flexible and strong. I've watched two men, both 76, both widowers living alone, approach this same situation completely differently. Donald spent most of his days by himself. He'd watch television, read the newspaper, maybe talk to a cashier at the grocery store. He told himself he was fine, that he didn't need much social contact. But over the course of a few years, I watched Donald's conversation skills deteriorate. When he did talk to people, he'd lose his train of thought. He'd repeat himself without realizing it. He'd struggle to follow what others were saying if the topic shifted quickly. His isolation wasn't protecting his independence. It was eroding the very mental sharpness he needed to stay independent. Arthur did something different. After his wife died, he made a deliberate choice to stay connected. He joined a discussion group at the library that met every Tuesday morning. He had coffee with a neighbor every Thursday. He called his daughter every Sunday and really talked with her, not just exchanged pleasantries. And Arthur stayed sharp. His mind remained quick, engaged, responsive. He could follow complex conversations, contribute meaningfully, adjust his thinking when presented with new information. The difference between Donald and Arthur wasn't intelligence or education. It was that Arthur understood his brain needed regular, genuine engagement with other minds to stay strong. You don't need a busy social calendar. You don't need to become someone you're not. But you do need regular, real conversations. Even 3 or 4 good conversations a week, conversations where you're truly present and engaged, can make a profound difference in maintaining your mental clarity. The next thing I want you to understand is about learning. I've heard so many people your age say they're too old to learn new things, that their brain doesn't work that way anymore. But that's not what I've observed. What I've seen is that people who keep learning, who stay curious, who regularly challenge themselves to understand something new. These people maintain mental sharpness that others lose. The key isn't what you learn. It doesn't have to be difficult or impressive. It has to be genuinely new to you, something that requires your brain to form new connections, to work in ways it hasn't worked before. Maybe it's learning to use a smartphone feature you've avoided. Maybe it's understanding how something in your house actually works. Maybe it's following a new recipe without help. The learning itself, the mental effort of grasping something unfamiliar, that's what strengthens your mind. I knew two women, both 73, both retired teachers who'd spent their careers helping children learn. Dorothy felt her learning days were behind her. She stuck to what she knew, what she'd always known. She read the same kinds of books. She cooked the same meals. She followed the same routines. And Dorothy's mind became less flexible over time. When she encountered something new, she'd feel frustrated, overwhelmed. She'd give up quickly. The world started feeling more complicated and confusing to her, not because the world had changed, but because her ability to adapt to newness had weakened. Helen approached retirement differently. She'd always been curious, and she stayed curious. She learned to use her computer for video calls with her grandchildren. She took a class on local history at the community center. She learned about native plants and started identifying them on her daily walks. None of these things were earth-shattering, but each one required her brain to work, to stretch, to accommodate new information. And Helen's mind stayed nimble. She could learn new things when she needed to. She adapted to changes. She felt capable and engaged with the world around her. The difference wasn't that Helen was smarter. The difference was that she kept asking her brain to do new things, and her brain responded by staying strong and flexible. I hope this is making sense so far. These aren't complicated interventions. They're simple patterns that make a real difference. Now let me talk about something you might not want to hear, but it's too important not to mention. Your physical movement affects your mental sharpness more than most people realize. I'm not talking about intense exercise or athletic training. I'm talking about regular movement, getting your body up and active in whatever way you're able to do. Here's what happens when you move. Your heart rate increases. Blood flow to your brain increases. Your brain gets more oxygen, more nutrients. Movement triggers the release of proteins that support brain cell health and the formation of new connections between brain cells. Movement reduces inflammation throughout your body, including in your brain. All of this matters for mental sharpness. Studies have shown this again and again. People who move regularly maintain better cognitive function than people who don't. But here's what I've noticed that goes beyond the studies. People who move regularly tend to stay more engaged with the world around them. They go places. They see people. They encounter new situations. And all of that stimulation, all of that variety, it feeds mental sharpness in ways that sitting at home simply can't. I watched two men, both 78, both dealing with some arthritis, approach this same challenge very differently. Edward let his discomfort become an excuse to move less and less. He'd sit in his recliner most of the day. He'd drive even short distances rather than walk. He told himself he was protecting his joints, saving his energy. But Edward's mind became foggy. He'd feel tired even though he hadn't done anything. His thinking felt slow, effortful. He'd struggle to concentrate on anything for long. William had the same arthritis, the same discomfort. But William kept moving. He walked every morning, slowly, carefully, but consistently. He'd stand up and stretch several times a day. He'd do his own grocery shopping, his own errands. And William's mind stayed clear. He could think through problems. He could focus when he needed to. He felt alert, present, alive in a way Edward didn't. The movement wasn't just keeping William's body functional. It was feeding his brain what it needed to stay sharp. You don't need to do much. A 20-minute walk most days. Getting up from your chair every hour to move around for a few minutes. Taking the stairs when you can. These small patterns of movement, maintained consistently, make a real difference to your mental clarity. Pay attention to this next part, because this is something most people get wrong. Sleep matters for your mental sharpness in ways you might not realize. I'm not just talking about feeling rested. I'm talking about your brain's ability to process information, to form and retrieve memories, to think clearly. When you don't sleep well, when your sleep is consistently disrupted or insufficient, your brain can't do the maintenance work it needs to do. It can't clear out waste products that build up during the day. It can't consolidate memories properly. It can't restore the chemical balance you need for clear thinking. Many people your age accept poor sleep as inevitable. They think waking up multiple times a night is just part of aging. And while some changes in sleep patterns are normal, chronically poor sleep isn't something you should just accept. It affects everything, and it especially affects your mind. I knew two women, both 74, both living independently. Catherine slept poorly. She'd wake up 3 or 4 times every night. She'd lie awake for long stretches. She'd finally fall back asleep an hour before she needed to wake up. Catherine told herself this was normal, that everyone her age slept this way. But her mental sharpness suffered. By afternoon, she could barely concentrate. She'd forget things she'd done that morning. She felt like she was living in a fog. Grace had the same initial sleep problems, but she didn't accept them. She talked to her doctor. She discovered her sleep position was making her acid reflux worse, which was waking her up. She made simple changes. She elevated the head of her bed slightly. She stopped eating within 3 hours of bedtime. She kept her room cooler and darker. Grace's sleep improved dramatically, and with better sleep came clearer thinking. She could remember things easily. She could focus on tasks. She felt present and capable. The difference wasn't in their brain's basic function. The difference was that Grace gave her brain the quality sleep it needed to work well. If you're not sleeping well, don't just accept it. There are often simple causes that can be addressed. It's worth the effort because the effect on your mental sharpness is profound. Let me tell you about something else I've noticed. The people who stay mentally sharp tend to have purpose in their daily lives. Not grand purpose, not some inspiring mission. Just regular activities that matter to them, that give structure to their days, that require their attention and engagement. It might be taking care of a garden. It might be managing their own finances. It might be staying involved with their grandchildren's lives in meaningful ways. It might be volunteering or maintaining their home or any number of other things. What matters isn't what the purpose is. What matters is that they have something that engages their mind regularly, something that requires them to plan, to remember, to solve small problems, to make decisions. When you have purpose, when you have responsibilities that matter to you, your brain stays active in ways that maintain sharpness. I think of two women I knew, both 80, both in good physical health. Ruth had nothing she needed to do. Her children managed her finances. She had no hobbies that engaged her. She'd wake up each day with no particular plan, no responsibility, nothing that required her attention. And Ruth's mind became dull. She'd sit for hours with nothing to think about. When you asked her a question, she'd take a long time to respond, not because she couldn't think, but because her mind had slowed from lack of use. She felt disconnected from life, unnecessary, and her mental sharpness reflected that. Betty had chosen differently. She managed her own household, paid her own bills, kept track of her own appointments. She maintained a small vegetable garden that required planning and daily attention. She wrote letters to her grandchildren every week, real letters that required thought and care. Betty's mind stayed engaged. She was quick, responsive, interested in things. She felt needed and purposeful, and that feeling kept her mentally sharp in ways that Ruth's empty days couldn't support. Purpose doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real, something that engages you, something that matters enough to keep your mind working. If you're finding this helpful, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear whether any of this matches your own experience. Now I want to talk about something that might seem small, but matters more than you'd think. What you eat affects your mental sharpness, not in dramatic, immediate ways, but over time, consistently. The fuel you give your brain makes a difference in how well it works. Your brain needs certain things to function well. It needs steady blood sugar, not the spikes and crashes that come from eating mostly simple carbohydrates. It needs healthy fats, the kind found in fish and nuts and olive oil, because your brain is largely made of fat, and it needs good fat to maintain itself. It needs antioxidants from colorful fruits and vegetables to protect against inflammation. It needs adequate protein to maintain the neurotransmitters that carry signals between brain cells. I'm not going to tell you to follow some strict diet. That's not realistic, and it's not necessary. But I'm going to tell you what I've observed. People who eat mostly whole foods, who include vegetables and fruits regularly, who eat fish or nuts several times a week, who don't rely primarily on processed foods. These people tend to maintain clearer thinking than people who don't. I watched two men, both 75, both retired, approach their eating very differently. Raymond ate for convenience. Frozen dinners, processed snacks, very few vegetables, mostly refined carbohydrates. He'd feel energetic right after eating, then crash an hour later. His thinking felt foggy most afternoons. He'd struggle to follow conversations or concentrate on anything complex. He thought this was just how being his age felt. Andrew ate simply but deliberately. Oatmeal with berries for breakfast. Salad with chicken or fish for lunch. Vegetables with dinner. Nuts for snacks. He wasn't following some complicated plan. He just chose real food most of the time. And Andrew's energy stayed steady through the day. His thinking remained clear. He could concentrate when he needed to. He felt mentally sharp in a way Raymond didn't. The difference wasn't dramatic day to day, but over years, the cumulative effect was significant. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to never eat dessert or never have processed food. But if most of what you eat, most days, is real food that nourishes your brain, you'll notice the difference in how clearly you can think. One more thing I need you to understand. Chronic stress, the kind that sits with you day after day, it damages your mental sharpness over time. Stress hormones, when they're elevated constantly, actually shrink the part of your brain responsible for memory. They interfere with your ability to concentrate. They make it harder to retrieve information you know you have. They affect your sleep, which, as I've already explained, affects everything else. Many people your age carry stress they don't even recognize anymore. Worry about health, about finances, about family members. Worry about the future, about losing independence. This constant low-level stress becomes so familiar they don't notice it. But it's there, working against their mental sharpness every day. The people who stay sharp find ways to manage stress. Not eliminate it, because that's not possible. But manage it, reduce it, give themselves regular breaks from it. Sometimes that's through activities that calm them. Sometimes it's through talking with someone they trust. Sometimes it's through changing what they can change and accepting what they can't. However they do it, they don't let chronic stress run unchecked. I knew two women, both 77, both widows managing on their own. Patricia worried constantly. About her health, about money, about everything. She'd lie awake at night running through worst-case scenarios. She'd feel anxious most of the time. And Patricia's memory suffered. She'd forget appointments. She'd lose track of conversations. She couldn't concentrate on anything because her mind was always racing with worry. The constant stress was literally interfering with her brain's ability to function well. Evelyn faced similar circumstances, similar challenges. But Evelyn had learned to manage her stress. She'd take a walk when she felt worried building. She'd call a friend and talk things through. She'd write down her concerns so they weren't circling endlessly in her head. She'd deliberately spend time doing things that calmed her, reading or listening to music or working in her garden. And Evelyn's mind stayed clear. She could remember things. She could focus. She could think through problems rationally. The circumstances weren't easier for Evelyn. She just didn't let constant stress erode her mental sharpness the way Patricia did. You can't eliminate stress from your life, but you can find ways to manage it, to give yourself relief from it regularly. And when you do, your mind works better. It's that simple. So let me bring all of this together for you. Keeping your mind sharp well into your 70s isn't about doing one big thing. It's about patterns, about daily choices that add up over time. Regular, genuine conversations that engage your mind. Continued learning, even small things, that keep your brain flexible. Physical movement that feeds your brain what it needs. Quality sleep that allows your brain to maintain itself. Purpose that keeps you engaged. Nutrition that supports clear thinking. Stress management that protects your brain from chronic damage. None of these things are complicated. None of them require special programs or expensive interventions. They're simple practices that anyone can incorporate into daily life. But they work. I've watched them work in person after person, year after year. The question isn't whether you can keep your mind sharp. The question is whether you'll make the small daily choices that support mental clarity, because the capacity is there. What's required is consistency, patience with yourself, and understanding that these small patterns matter more than you might think. I want you to think about one thing from this conversation that stood out to you. Maybe it's something you're not doing that you could start doing. Maybe it's something you're doing that you need to do more consistently. Just pick one thing. Don't try to change everything at once. Pick one pattern that would support your mental sharpness and focus on building that into your daily life. Because that's how real change happens, not through dramatic overhauls, but through small, consistent choices that compound over time. And the reward, the ability to stay mentally sharp, to remain yourself, to keep your independence and capability, that's worth the effort. If this conversation has been helpful to you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this, someone who's worried about their memory or their mental clarity, please share this with them. These conversations matter. They help people understand what they can do, what's actually in their control. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me through this. I'll be here again with more observations, more patterns worth understanding. Until then, be patient with yourself. Your mind is more capable than you might think. Give it what it needs, and it will serve you well for many years to come.